Hello everyone, welcome back to Garden Fever. I'm Corey Lefevre, your host, coming to you direct from northern Utah in the United States. I want to thank you for joining me today. Our goal here is to make the world a paradise 1 yard at a time. So I got a good episode for you today. I want to talk to you about a fallacy or a myth, a garden myth. You may have already discovered this over time, but if you're new to gardening, you may not know this. And that's the myth of garden cloth. You see, with garden cloth, the idea behind it is to block weeds from growing and allow your own plants to flourish. And I want to first disclaim that weed cloth does work. It does suppress weeds, but it's not eternal. When you place weed cloth and you layer it several layers and you put lots of mulch, it will suppress weeds and it will do it for some time. However, as you can see in this example, this cloth was put in when I first moved into this house. I just went out and looked at it, and as you can see, there's weeds growing. So it's kind of a myth, and it's a myth that I don't want new gardeners to just think that once they lay some weed cloth that their problems will go away. It will look good for a while. It will suppress weeds for a while, but this is not eternal. Over time, weeds will come up. They will get through the cracks. Bugs will poke holes in it, and eventually it'll happen. Not only that, even if you have a thick layer and you have lots of mulch, what ends up happening is dust, yard debris, leaves, and things like that will eventually form in the cracks of the mulch, and it basically creates a type of soil on top of the mulch. So you're going to have to redo this if you use this method several times every few years or whatever, depending on how thick and whatnot that you do it. And it's not a permanent solution. And another thing that it does is it suppresses water from draining up and down. Now you soak it through, it can preserve water underneath, but it also doesn't allow the worms to go. It suppresses it all. It makes a barrier that doesn't allow that natural process, and that process is conducive for creating topsoil, which goes along with another method called back to Eden gardening method. And we're not going to talk about this in this video. However, in a future video, I am going to give my opinions on the back to Eden gardening method. Weed management is not going to be easy. It will suppress them, but what ends up happening is it's not conducive for everything in the garden. For example, bulbs, like tulips and lilies and all of these other plants, onions and stuff. If you don't have it marked exactly where it's at, the mulch and the weed cloth is going to suppress them from returning each year. Yes, for bushes, trees, you have the long stem poking out in the spring, so you know exactly where the plant is, and you can water around the base. For those that cut a hole in it, what ends up happening is weeds start growing right around the base, and you basically bring the weeds to the base of the plant. Unless you're actively weeding that and keeping it free, but that kind of defeats the purpose if you ask me. Maybe not as big of a weed problem, but you still have your weed problem. So I don't recommend doing that. I do recommend wood chips and mulch though. Just keep a good marker on where those bulbs are. Why? Because wood chips don't suppress the water from coming down. It allows the bugs and the microorganisms and the worms to go up and down freely. You also get your drainage that goes up and down. You still kind of protect the topsoil from the sun, and you also keep the soil moist longer underneath. So I would recommend wood chips. However, weeds are still going to come back. The definition of weeds is an unwanted plant growing in your garden. And you got to understand that when we create ideal conditions for plant growth, it's unbiased. We're not just making good conditions for plants that we enjoy and love and want to grow in our garden. We're also making ideal conditions for plants that we don't want. And they're going to flourish. They're hard, they're tough, they take little care. So once they get good nutrients, they get good watering, they get good care, they explode. And that's why weeds are so difficult. So in short, it's really about weed management, not weed extermination. I've placed plywood, I've placed cement blocks, and the weeds still get through. you cannot fully block the weeds. So it's about managing the weeds, not eliminating them. For example, look at the cracks in our sidewalks, even in our roads. This is a thick layer of hard material, and they still crack them. Weeds still come up in the cracks, and eventually, if you leave a road alone for long enough, the weeds eventually come back. It's inevitable. I hope this helps you, gives you a good idea. If you're just starting out in gardening, just realize that weed cloth is really not, it will help you temporarily, but it's not going to solve your weed problem. When you pull weeds, I really think that's the best method, because you're aerating it, you're disturbing the soil slightly, you're still kind of managing the weeds, and you're doing it in a way that is a little bit more conducive to topsoil growth. However, it's incredibly labor intensive. If you're not bending down up and down properly, you're gonna hurt your back. If you don't have the right tools, it's gonna ache, you're gonna have aches and pains, and that's not conducive when you're older. When you're an old person, you don't wanna have back problems and do that much labor intensive work. So I would recommend finding an herbicide that is environmentally friendly. And back in the olden days, the chemicals were really harsh, they weren't really that great for the environment. That's kind of changing, it's shifting. A lot of companies are being more conscientious of it, and they're more conscientious that their consumer that is buying their products want these kind of products. So I would find a herbicide that is environmentally friendly. It's not going to hurt the pets. That if it's sprayed on your food, it's not going to hurt you. Those kinds are the best kind. I'm not doing a video on those, so do your homework, do your research. But if you're an older person and you can't really weed on a regular basis, this is probably your best method. So just put the mulch, use the herbicide, and manage the weeds. It's not about eliminating them, because you never will. With that, I want to thank you for joining me today. Make sure you smash that like button. I truly appreciate my subscribers. Share, like, subscribe, comment. If you're new, subscribe. And also, if there's any suggestions or ideas that you have, please leave them in the comments. I think open discussion and idea sharing is awesome. Knowledge is power, but it's not just power. As Tony Robbins would say, knowledge is potential power. Unless you apply it, it's just knowledge. So let's share information, let's practice, let's see what works, what doesn't. Let's share each other's mistakes, share each other's successes, and let's make this world a paradise 1 yard at a time.